have sympathy with Nicola and Mark. Clearly, we're all against rape. It's a hideous accusation and allegation and a hideous crime. Having said that, what you see in things like Mark's a resilient man. He was 6 weeks being investigated over Christmas and New Year. The impact on him and his family must have been enormous, and the strain and the trauma that's there. It's almost, and we do believe in innocent till proven guilty in this country, but we know that because of the trauma that people who are accused of these things go through, it's an unusual punishment that they have to go. And they themselves, and I'm talking particularly and only in these areas where people are not charged, they become the victim.
I mean, the complaint appears to be that this is an exceptional crime in as much as the accuser has anonymity but the accused doesn't.
Yes, and the thing that we find is that people that are accused of terrorism offence or child abuse, they are crimes that also have a stigma to them. Rape isn't unique in that respect. But the stigma of reporting rape for a rape victim is unique because a lot of women are fearful of coming forward because of cultural issues. If you come forward and report rape, a lot of the time you're the one that's seen as the liar, not just from the police, but from the wider community.
Which you might be, of course.
Well, reported rapes are the rate of women that are falsely accused, or what is known as a false accusation, are less than 2% of all reported rapes. So the amount of false rape allegations are so tiny that introducing anonymity for men that are charged would set the anti-rape movement back 30 years.
Is it the imbalance that annoys you? I mean, if there wasn't anonymity for accusers, would you be happy for the accused to be named?
No, I want anonymity for the accusers for all the reasons that Nicola knows, which is that we want to encourage people who have been victims of rape to come forward, and one of the ways they do that is by full knowledge that throughout their entire life they remain anonymous unless they wish to waive that right. And I think that's important, Adam. But what I also think is important is that police are allowed to investigate somebody like Mark, which they would have done over 6 weeks, found that there was not evidence sufficient to take it any further, and decided after 6 weeks, which is a relatively short time, to say that's it, the investigation's over. In somebody like Paul Gambaccini's case, it was a year. And for that year, Paul didn't work. Now, Paul's not unique in that regard because there have been other high-profile cases.
A lot of people on police bail who haven't worked in other
areas,
notably in the hacking and
absolutely.
the rest of it. Yeah.
And that's why I think that the issue of bail, which is being looked at, is something that desperately does need to be looked at. But all I want to do is to bring in the equality of it. And it used to be the case that prior to 1988, it was anonymous for both sides. In 1988, it was decided to change it so that those who were being accused were no longer anonymous. I think we've tried this experiment long enough. There is no recognition, and absolutely no recognition, Adam, of the impact that an investigation, high profile, with a full glare of publicity has on people.
What are the advantages of naming someone who's accused?
Well, the thing is, you know, it sounds reasonable to say let's not name men unless they're charged, but the reality for reporting rape is that it's one of the hardest things you have to do because automatically the police look for reasons as to why you might be lying, rather as to why you're telling the truth. It's very, very difficult to get a rape charge to court even. And a lot of the time the police can only do that if there is more than one victim. So if we're not going to name men until they're charged, it means that a lot of other victims won't have the courage to come forward. If they see that somebody has been named, it often gives them the courage to come forward.
I mean, that is surely the most telling reason for naming. If we look at all these child abuse and related cases emerging
post-Adam, it's an important aspect that more people come forward, and we saw it with Stuart Hall and Rolf Harris, right? So we've seen that.
Initially.
But the fact is that in cases like Paul Gambaccini's and in Mark Pritchard's and a number of others, nobody else comes forward. So they've gone through
justice is, I mean, as you know, justice is a rough process for a lot of people, for anybody who's accused of anything, and even if they go as far as facing trial and being acquitted.
But Adam, if we can introduce a system that has some sort of equity, more equity in it than is currently the case, then that needs to happen. And my suggestion is, I'll make one suggestion here, which is that the police are able to go to a judge and say, we believe that anonymity should be lifted in this particular case because, and we've got evidence as to why more people will come forward.
You know, if men weren't named before they were charged, then none of us would know about what Jimmy Savile had done. When Stuart Hall stood on the steps when he was first charged, when he was charged with the rape of one woman, he stood on the steps and the allegations, he said, were spurious, cruel, callous and absolutely untrue, but because he had been named, other women came forward and he was found guilty.
Nicola.
And in Rotherham, girls were going to the police and saying, I have been raped, I'm being systematically raped by numbers of men, and they were being told to go away and being told that they would be charged. Some of them were actually charged and were convicted of harassment, criminal damage, being drunk. Women are coming forward and reporting rape and not being believed, and bringing anonymity in for men is perpetuating this ridiculous myth that the majority of women lie about rape.
I think in the past, Nicola, there was a lot of when people walked in that they weren't instantly believed. Now that has changed. There's a lot more emphasis on saying that automatically the police believe and encourage more women to come forward.
That doesn't happen.
More women should come forward if they have been raped.
But you now have the advantage of having been cleared.
Yes.
As does Mark Pritchard. I mean, isn't that worth something as well?
Yeah, but it's that's what I wanted to ask Nicola. Do you even understand the trauma that somebody like Paul Gascoigne, Cliff Richard, who hasn't even been arrested. I mean, there are a number of cases out there that I'm now clearly taking an interest in. There was one, Oxford Union student president Ben Sullivan, 6 weeks that he had to go through enormous trauma, never mind the expense, because there's expense as soon as the clock starts ticking for those who are accused and they don't get their money back. I'm just asking, Nicola, do you understand for a single second what it's like for those people to go through that accusation?
I think it's really patronising for you to say, do I even understand? Because for anybody that's falsely accused of a crime, it is horrific. But with the greatest of respect to everybody here, being found not guilty or not facing any charges is completely different to a false rape allegation. And when a woman goes to the police and reports rape, and either the police close it or the CPS close it, or due to a fact that a really poor prosecution is played out in court and they don't get justice, can you imagine living with that? Can you imagine living with being raped and knowing that that the person that raped you has walked free to rape other women? Of course, I have sympathy for anybody that's falsely accused of a crime, but an acquittal is very, very different.
But you think it's worth them going through the trauma, them and their families going through that trauma?
I think that if we're talking about trying to secure justice for rape victims, you have to look at what is better overall. Okay, and if you go to court and you're acquitted, you can get on with your life. A woman that is raped and doesn't get any justice, it's a lot harder. A lot of us speak from personal experience.
But Nicola, it's almost you're saying it's like a walk in the park.
Absolutely
you
not.
Just go through a court
when
trial.
have I said it's a walk in the park?
Adam, I can't even begin.
It's not a walk in the park at all.
Just think, right, for all your listeners out there, that you get a knock on the door at 7:30 and you're accused of rape. Just think what it's like for the person and the family.
But
but all I'm asking for is...
And we do understand that.
The issue is you are singling out a particular crime or a particular accusation. I mean, no one, whatever they've done, likes getting a knock on the door at 6 in the morning from the police. And most of those people can be identified, you know, if they're accused of theft or assault or, you know, drunk driving or whatever, they can be identified. So you have to make the case as to why, in this particular case...
I just think that there's something special about a sex allegation these days, and it's not just simply the Jimmy Savile thing. I think anybody who's accused of a sexual crime, there tends to be a stigma with it that even lingers post either no further action or indeed acquittal. It's one of those things, and you recognise that. I mean, rape is a hideous thing to be accused of, and it's a hideous thing to go through.
Of course, but we also find that when you have reported rape, if you don't get any justice in any step of the system, you're the one that's looked at as you made a false rape allegation, you made it up, and that is absolutely soul destroying. You have to live with being raped, and then you have to live with being called a liar.
A few cases of women who've actually been sent to prison.
Absolutely, and we believe that some of those are miscarriages of justice. We're working to overturn those because a lot of the time the media reports things that absolutely aren't true, and if you actually look at behind the scenes at what happens in court, you think, my God, how did these women get found guilty of making a false allegation? Gail Sherwood, Layla Ibrahim, you know, we're working at the moment to try and overturn their convictions because we believe they're miscarriages of justice. And of course, as I've said, Nigel, we have every sympathy for anybody that's falsely accused of a crime, but an acquittal is not the same as a false allegation.
I just want to ask you, finally, Nigel, as a parliamentarian, do you think the law is going to be changed on this, or is this a pretty long battle?
There needs to be some consensus, and prior to 2010, all the parties were looking at it, but they just couldn't get agreement. I'm just thinking that in light of the experience, not just of Mark Pritchard and myself, but the number of other high-profile cases that have now come forward, and that eventually the Justice Secretary will say, come on, let's just get equity and back to where we were in 1988.
Well, no, we hope not, because it would be a disaster. Because do we really believe that the 94% of acquittals, do we really believe? We'd all have to be very naive to believe that 94%.
Okay, well, thank you both very much indeed.
Thank you.